I'm going over the residential purchase agreement. This is the bulk of the offer that has all of the terms that we're including in the offer. That's what the seller's agent is probably printing out and highlighting for the seller to actually review so that they can understand what the buyers are offering. Keep in mind, anything you see in black is standard on all the California agreements. Anything you see in blue is information that's put in. I'm going to give you the information as far as what's common, but remember, everything's negotiable. So let's get to it. Okay, first page, basic information, buyer's info, property address. For the purposes of this, we're using my office address and we're buying it for $1 million and putting 20% down. So basic information, who's representing who, that's where my info is. Purchase price, if you're a cash offer, you get to click this button. Close of escrow, 21 to 30 days is pretty common. It could be shorter, it could be longer. Remember, all offers in California expire in 3 days, whether or not that's how people actually use them. Um, Meaning, like, a lot of times people will respond sooner, or even though there's an expiration, um, they'll wait longer. And if the buyer still wants to work with you, then that's great. But this is where that would go. The initial deposit, that's your earnest money deposit, your good faith deposit. Typically 3% of the purchase price. I've seen it be lower in situations where people didn't have the funds, but it does take convincing on the part of the agent to the listing agent. Loan amount. So in this situation, we're doing 20% down. So it's an 80% loan amount. So that's the 800,000. So when we go to close, we're bringing the 30,000 up front when we open escrow, and then the 170 when we close. I'll be right before we close escrow for the 200,000 to be 20% of a down payment. On the next page, we're going over seller credits if that's for a 2-1 buy down or any kind of a buy down, or towards closing costs. This is what we're asking for up front. This doesn't include if there's repairs that you're going to ask for later on. That can be in addition to whatever you're asking for here. Um, if you are cash, then you need to include this information. You also need to include proof of funds for your down payment. And they also want to know where you're at on that pre-approval process. Are you attaching a pre-qualification, a pre-approval, or are you fully underwritten? Pre-qual means you haven't run credit. Pre-approval means you have run credit. Fully underwritten means you've done all of that and an employment verification. 5 days before close of escrow is when you're going to do that final verification of condition. We call it the final walkthrough. Assignment request is really uncommon, but if you do need to change names or who's buying the property, you have 17 days to do that. Loan contingency, loan contingency, we're looking at um, a loan appraisal and investigation right here. This is probably the most important section for you because the contingencies are what keep that initial deposit safe. If you've removed all of your contingencies and then all of a sudden you want to move to a different state and you don't want to buy here, then your deposit is very much so at stake. So we don't want to remove contingencies until you're absolutely ready to move forward. So let's go over it. So what you see here, these 17 days that they have, that's what they just put in there as, hey, if you don't put anything in, it's 17 days. That's what it's reverting to. What's common is what I commonly see for loan and appraisal, anywhere from 8 to 12 days if you have those contingencies. If it's longer than that, that's okay too, but this is commonly what I see and what we're offering when we are being aggressive on a property. Investigation. I see anywhere from 4 days to 17 days, depending on what people need. But 10 days is what we're asking for. You'll notice that I didn't include anything on this second section. That's because that's actually us asking for access to the property. We will take that for the full amount of time that we can. If you're removing any of the other contingencies, then any of the investigation contingencies, then we want to um, attach it in a separate form. Something that I do want to point out to you guys is that you have a completely different contingency for HOA. So right here, we have loan, we have appraisal, we have investigation, which people think of as their inspection contingency. Okay. We also get to review the seller documents. We get to look at the title report and the HOA report. And if there's any leased or liened items, that's like solar or um, honestly, mostly solar or like equipment. Uncommon though. So the common interest disclosures, that's your HOA documents. That's a whole extra contingency that you're getting, but commonly people loop it in with investigation because that's what we're looking at it with. Everything. We're doing that investigation to see if you guys want to move forward on the property. If you are selling your property to buy a property, then we wouldn't include that here. Time of possession. So there's possession and then there's a lease after sale. Possession is 29 days or less, and a lease is 30 days to 60 days. So possession means we're going to give them more time and we'll tell you how many days here, right, for how long that they have. Possession could be for free. It could be charged. The same thing with the lease after sale. Seller possession, though, most commonly does not cost anything when you're negotiating in a really tough situation. If you're not in a super tough situation, then commonly buyers will ask a seller to cover the mortgage or part of their mortgage. Even if their mortgage hasn't started yet, it's still good to ask for the money if you can. And then we're going to go down here. Oh, and if the property is occupied by tenants, we'll note that here. We're going to look at some of the seller's rules that they have to comply with as far as timeline goes. They have to give you the documents 7 days after acceptance. They have to return the information. They have to ask, they have to pay for the fees for the HOA, and then also install smoke alarms, carbon monoxide detectors, and brace the water heater. You'll see me mention that down here as well, but that's just for the seller to have in their own awareness. Now we're going to go to the next page. You'll see again all of the items marked blue, or just what I've marked or put in there just to like bring to light for you guys. So here we get to check which appliances you get with a property. If it's something that you don't want, you don't need to check it. But if there's something on the property and you do want it, it needs to be checked, or else it's not considered included with the sale. Other items that I do typically include pool equipment. If there's solar, a lot of people want it paid off, so we put that here. Things that are also technically included with the home, but a lot of sellers don't know, are like curtains. So if you don't want their curtains, I write it here so that they know. If you do want their curtains, also not a bad idea to write it in, even though it's already technically considered part of the sale. Then what we're going to go down here, it's a whole nother section. This is all about the costs. Okay. So there's a bunch of different reports that you get during escrow. Some of them the seller pays for, some of them you guys pay for. The ones that you pay for would be like general inspection, any inspections that you want on the property. Typically, if you're getting financing, we're not going to put termite in the contract, but you can 100% get termite. If you want the seller to pay for termite, you do need to put it in the contract. Termite is probably about $100. So if that's something you want the seller to pay for, which I would say is not the most uncommon, not the most common thing, we would want to put that in here as well. But any of those extra reports go in here. With natural hazard disclosure, seller usually pays for that. I always click environmental because then it gives you more information than less. Those are those extra, this right here are the extra inspection reports that you guys might want. And this is how I typically would fill out an offer agreement. So we want the seller to pay for the smoke alarms and detectors and all of that if needed. This will actually say if needed. And then here, what we do is government reports, anything required by the government. It's actually very uncommon. There's only a few cities in which they're asking for that. Some might be Inglewood, but otherwise, I still put if any because it's the sellers. We're going to put it on the sellers to tell us if there's anything particular that we need. And if there's not, then they can always counter it back out from us. Escrow fee, typically will have each person pay their own fees. Sellers do typically pick the escrow and title company. A lot of times they've been working with people beforehand. If there's a company that you like in particular, you can always ask for it. It's uncommon for them to be open to whoever, but it's happened before. So that's always a possibility. Now, the seller is also typically paying for the title insurance policy for the buyer. County transfer tax, this is common in South Orange County, like RSM, RMV, Aliso, Ladera Ranch. There's some fees. So we would always want to put the seller as the person who's paying for this unless they've indicated otherwise. And again, that's if there's any. If any. If there's not, then great. They can let us know that there's none. HOA, if there's an HOA transfer fee, we always want to put that on the seller. But sometimes there's no fee. Again, I'm always writing this if there is anything so that we're covered in case there is, and then the buyer's in the best possible position. Because I'd rather start a negotiation with the buyer at a stronger point, and then the seller can come back and say what they actually would change. And then we're also here asking for the seller to pay for the home warranty. It's a common thing sellers will pay for. A lot of them will ask to pay only up to like $550. I always put $750 or higher just because we can, right? Like the worst thing that they could say is no. We typically recommend first American home warranty. Buyers can always change that. Just writing the offer just to give us a heads up. We always put a CREST policy in there because it's a higher level policy that is boosted because of who our insurance is. So it's not something that costs more for the buyers or the sellers rather. And then buyers can always determine upgrades in escrow, and we're happy to make any introductions to a home warranty company. So just right there, we've gone through the bulk of the offer. If there's anything super different about this property versus another one, like it's a probate or there's septic or it needs court confirmation or it's a short sale, this is where we'd put that in here. But most of the time this is going unchecked, and actually there's nothing else that gets filled in except for signatures and the last pages. So I'm going to go through the other pages now, but we've just finished the bulk of the offer. Something that I do want to bring to everyone's attention is on page 14. There's a section right here that's all about liquidated damages and arbitration. This, as you can see on my DocuSign, I am not forcing anybody to sign it. As an agent, it's really up to you guys. But a lot of people miss it on their DocuSign because we can't make it like a mandatory signature. So unless you're scrolling slowly, you will miss this page. This is an important page because I will say typically like 99% of our buyers and sellers opt to sign this page because it's seen, at least by them, as pretty friendly for the consumer, like buyers and sellers. So if there's a problem, then you go to arbitration instead of court. And same with liquidated damages. So this, I do recommend reading it, or if you have any questions, you can always like ask a lawyer. But I will say this is something that gets signed fairly often. But I do want to put this here because it's something that could be good for you. I'm going to go back through some of the other pages, but this is the end of the offer. So this is where people are signing. If it's an entity, you'll see, like, I'll note that here, like if you're buying it in an LLC or in a trust. But it's just at least filling out information. And if your offer gets accepted, it gets filled out with the escrow information. Everything that you see here in the black is actually standard on all offers. It's going to go over like provisions, the little things here and there, definitions. So that's important for you guys to be aware of. I do recommend reading all of it, but I know it's a lot. So it is important to read. I've gone over some of the little like tips and tricks and things to be aware of when it comes to reading all of this, but you guys will have all of this information here. And if you have any questions, you can always let us know. Happy house hunting.